Welcome to part 3 of this Simply Cracking Good Stories introductory workshop. In the previous section, we got ready to write a simple short script in the present tense, in which our character encounters a problem or a challenge. This is what I did. Lisa is cutting Mrs. Albert's hair. She's holding a pair of scissors in one hand. She's holding a hot hairdryer in the other. She looks at herself in the mirror. Am I old, she thinks. Am I pretty, she thinks. Mrs. Alberts complains about her husband. Lisa doesn't hear her. She thinks about Peter, who lives upstairs. She smiles. Does Peter think I am pretty, she wonders. Mrs. Alberts complains about her husband again. Lisa doesn't hear her. Lisa smells burning. Lisa looks at the hairdryer. Mrs. Alberts yells. I'm sorry, says Lisa. You burnt my head, shouts Mrs. Alberts. So far, so good. But now we need to simplify the language even more. Let's look at the rules. Rule 1. Stick to simple subject, verb, object sentences. Rule 2. Stick to short sentences. Do not join clauses. So my sentence, she thinks about Peter who lives upstairs, is no good. We need to separate it into 2 sentences. She thinks about Peter and Peter lives upstairs. Rule 3. Write in simple present tense. So my first 3 sentences need to change. Is cutting and is holding are no good. Sometimes you can just change the verb. She is holding a hot hairdryer becomes she holds a hot hairdryer. Other times you might have to be a bit more creative. I don't like Lisa cuts Mrs. Albert's hair, so I'm going to write. Mrs. Alberts sits in the chair. Lisa stands behind Mrs. Alberts. She is holding a pair of scissors in one hand. She is holding a hot hairdryer in the other. We don't need to actually say Lisa is cutting Mrs. Albert's hair. It's obvious. Rule 4. Adverbs and adjectives. Take them all out and put back only those that you really need. The same goes for prepositions. So, in our story, do we need to say the hairdryer is hot? No. So out it comes. Rule 5. Use everyday words readers already know or need to know. I have used 3 verbs that might be too difficult for very basic learners. Complain, wonder and yell. I think complain is an important verb, so I'll leave it in, but I'll replace yell with shout and wonder with think. Rule 6. Do not use pronouns like their, he and she. It might sound strange to use a name again and again, but newcomers to the English language often get lost trying to figure out who he and she refer to, and it can knock their confidence. So Lisa doesn't hear her, she thinks about Peter, becomes Lisa doesn't hear Mrs. Alberts, Lisa thinks about Peter. So applying all of the rules on the worksheet to our story, we get this. Mrs. Alberts sits in the chair. Lisa stands behind Mrs. Alberts. Lisa holds scissors and a hairdryer. Lisa looks in the mirror. Lisa thinks, am I old? Lisa thinks, am I pretty? Mrs. Alberts complains about her husband. Lisa does not hear Mrs. Alberts. Lisa thinks about Peter. Peter lives upstairs. Lisa smiles. Lisa thinks, does Peter think I am pretty? Mrs. Alberts complains about her husband. Lisa does not hear Mrs. Alberts. Lisa smells burning. Lisa looks at the hairdryer. Mrs. Alberts shouts. Lisa says, I'm sorry. Mrs. Alberts shouts, you burned my head. So have a go yourself. Register on our website, if you are not already. Send us what you write And very soon, with our help, you could be writing books for learners all over the world.